Did you know that setting boundaries was a form of self love? When you set boundaries, you are recognizing what you need and making space for it. Boundaries help us prioritize our physical and mental well being and also helps us create healthy relationships. Setting boundaries is self care. Let's talk about it.
Oh, there we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Talk About It Tuesdays. I'm your host, Tiffany Story, and Talk About It Tuesdays is my online blog segment of Living the Stress Life podcast. And I typically do this podcast with my co host, who is also my husband and Level for Life, Lamar's Story. And so, if this is your first time joining me, welcome. Tune in to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast player that you use to get podcasts. You can find Living a Stress Life podcast there. I want to make sure I'm not glitching and everybody can hear me well. I am in a new space where I did not anticipate doing Talk About It Tuesdays. And so, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I'm going to try to look at my comments. So if you see me looking down, I'm trying to also make sure I'm monitoring my own self for glitching and stuff because I want to make sure the Wi-Fi is stable. But let's get into today's topic. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will give you a shout out if I see your name up, but I don't see anybody's name up. I do see I have viewers. So, hey, thank you for joining me. So, today's topic, we are talking about setting boundaries as a form of self love. And setting boundaries is actually a form of self care. I know that we talked about boundaries about 2 weeks ago when I did Talk About It Tuesdays, and you can find any Talk About It Tuesday episode on our YouTube. You can go through our Facebook post, and you should be able to find the videos. So I try to make sure that you have access to those. So check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and you'll get notifications anytime we are streaming live. But a few weeks ago, we talked about setting boundaries and how no is a complete sentence, right? It's okay to be able to set boundaries for yourself. Thank you, Elinda. Thank you for giving me a thumbs up and letting me know you can hear me clearly. So let's get into boundaries as a form of self-love or self-care, because I think a lot of us don't think about boundaries as a form of self-care, but if you really understand what it looks like to establish boundaries, I think you'll have a deeper understanding of why it's considered a form of self love. So, personal boundaries are important because they establish a sense of worth. They help us establish a safe space for ourselves. And so, when we don't set boundaries, what that ultimately means is that other people they're dictating our decisions, they're dictating our whereabouts, they're dictating our finances. And so there are so many different aspects of our lives where we don't always establish healthy boundaries. And what it says to other people when you don't establish those boundaries is that they actually have say so or have a right in your life in places that they maybe should not have a voice or a right or a space. And so when you establish personal boundaries, what you ultimately are doing is telling yourself that you are valuable, you are worthy of creating a space that is just for you. Um, when you're setting boundaries, you're also telling other people that, hey, this is my line. I'm drawing a line in the sand and you won't cross it. And so there are aspects of our lives where we don't think that there are boundaries. Like, for instance, a lot of people are tight with money, or they don't allow other people to dictate what they do with their money. But there are many people who do. So if you were to draw a financial boundary, you can actually have okay, sorry guys. My mama decided to call me in the middle of me streaming. And so I'm gonna shoot her a text message because I thought I put this on do not disturb, but it's always like your mom to call you in the middle of you doing something. I'm gonna tell her I'm streaming and can't talk. All right, this is real life. This is stress life. Okay. So financial, get back to financial boundary. So let's say you were drawing a financial boundary. Drawing a financial boundary would say, hey, if I have anything less than $100 in my account, even if somebody is only asking to borrow five, I can't do it because I don't know what may come up that may require me having money. So that's my personal boundary. Anything less than $100, I don't have it to give. I'm broke. That's drawing a financial boundary. Or, hey, I'll give you money one time to bail you out of a situation, but if every other week you have an emergency and you're needing my help, then hey, I can't help you. Y'all, my mama is texting me, asking me how she get on. It's really funny when your parents be trying to support you, and I so appreciate her love. Let me tell her to call my husband. So that's me drawing the boundary with my mama, y'all. So those of you who streaming in and got my mama's cell phone number, please tell her how to tune in to my Talk About It Tuesdays, okay? Okay, so let's talk about why it's important to draw boundaries for other people. When you draw boundaries for other people, what it says to them is that you're creating a space where you're prioritizing yourself, and it's also telling other people that this is a line they're not willing to cross. I talked about how when people have bad boundaries, sometimes it's an indication that they have other things that are going on, right? And there are so many different ways where you can kind of identify where a person may not be the best person to be in a relationship based on their boundaries. But having poor boundaries can actually create chaos in our life. And if you really say that you love yourself and if you're really showing up for yourself, the best way to prove that to yourself is by creating those boundaries. So I'm going to give you 4 tips today about how to establish boundaries so that you can show yourself self-compassion, so that you can prioritize your own mental and physical well-being, and so that you're able to actually show other people just how much you care about them. Because honestly, if you don't set boundaries for yourself and prioritize yourself, it's very hard to show up for the people that you say matter if you're not even willing to show up for yourself. So the first thing you want to do is really start by recognizing what type of boundaries you need to establish. Identify the different types of boundaries. Assess, what does my life look like? I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed, my relationships feel strained. And so why is that? Am I lacking boundaries in my life? So identifying boundaries or the type of boundaries that you need to establish is a great first step. Do I need financial boundaries? Am I not putting boundaries in place for myself when it comes to spending money? Am I just aimlessly spending money? Do I have a system in place? Am I prioritizing my bills, or am I prioritizing my impulses? And am I spending from a place of my feelings or how I am in that moment or where I am mentally in that moment? Or do I actually have a system in place? Am I actually putting restrictions on myself for areas where I know that I might be impulsive or may be struggling? So identifying boundaries is a good first step. There are so many types of boundaries. Let's talk about more boundaries. I mentioned financial boundaries, but there are intimate relationship boundaries. You can draw boundaries with your spouse. You could draw boundaries with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your partner. Just saying, hey, at the end of the day, I need about 30 minutes to myself where I can just really decompress and process my day. I'm not trying to be distant. I'm not trying to be withdrawn. I just really need this space for myself. Long ago, when I first started working at inpatient care, I would find that sometimes I would be so tapped out when I would leave work and I would have to get my kids that I just needed peace and quiet because my workspace was chaotic, it was busy, it was unpredictable. So sometimes on my way from work to pick up my kids or on my way home, if my husband picked up the kids, I would just ride in complete silence. I would take the time to kind of go through what was stressful in my day, what was great about my day, what are some things I'm still holding on to. And I took that time as my time. Sometimes I wouldn't call him. My husband would call me and I'm like, hey, why you didn't let me know when you got off? And I'm just like, hey, I needed this time for myself. So drawing those boundaries in your intimate relationships, drawing boundaries with your coworkers or your job. Like I don't answer emails on my lunch break, or I don't respond to work phone calls during my lunch break. I don't respond to non-emergency work related calls on the weekends or when I'm on vacation. Those boundaries help you avoid burnout, right? So you can identify boundary places where you need to improve your boundaries at work, in your finances, in your relationships, including church members, including, charitable organizations, with your children, with your parents. You can establish boundaries in so many different places of your life. And then establishing boundaries with yourself. That's the hardest one, is actually putting the restrictions in place for yourself. Like I had a coworker who basically said, I don't purchase sweets when I go to the grocery store because I have a tendency to overindulge, especially when I'm feeling stressed. So if I want something sweet, I go out and get it. If I feel like I've done really good and I've been very disciplined with not overindulging in too much sugar, then going to get something sweet, I feel okay. I feel better about it, because I didn't overindulge. But if I keep it in the house, I know I am guaranteed to overindulge in sugar. So her boundary is, if I don't buy it, I won't overindulge, because by the time I have to get up, put on clothes, drive to wherever I want to go for that sweet, it's not worth it. I've lost the motivation, or it's cold or too hot. And so by not bringing it into the home, she put that boundary in place. So that's the first step. Identify where you are struggling, chaos in your life, and where you need to, what type of boundaries you need to establish. The second one is create a list of those boundaries. Once you kind of identify, actually write them down. Write them down, and so that you actually know what the process is going to be to establishing a goal. I did SMART goals, I think, back in January. So when you create a goal, you want to make it a SMART goal. You want to make it specific. You want to be able to measure it. It needs to be achievable. It needs to be realistic. That's the R. And then there needs to be a specific time frame. So saying I want to lose weight is not a specific goal, right? But if you say I want to lose 20 pounds, something you can measure, in 3 months, it has a specific time frame, by walking twice a week. You got specifically how you're going to do it. Is it achievable? Yes, you can lose weight with the right discipline, right? Is it realistic? Losing 20 pounds in 3 months, is that a realistic goal? You might have to look up what's the average weight loss for a person who is doing moderate exercise and with no dietary changes. And so, hey, if you look it up and it says you have to make these adjustments, then you adjust your goal to be more realistic. But you want to make sure that when you write down your jot of boundaries, that you create specific goals or SMART goals to help you get to establishing those boundaries. Because honestly, it's hard to make changes. And then I suggest don't try to do too many things at one time. If it's something minor, like, hey, I can put away $10 every paycheck into my savings account. That may be more feasible for you if you are really bad at saving money and you don't save a penny. $10 may seem like a big challenge. It's realistic for most people, but that's a small change. So you could commit to that. But in an area where you tend to be more disciplined, hey, you can set one or two boundary goals there. So first one is identify the types of boundaries you need to set in your life. And then secondly, actually write those down so that you can create specific concrete goals. And then the last tip is be consistent, right? And I think most people think of consistency as never making a mistake or never falling off, but that's not really um, that's not really what it means to be consistent. Consistent means that you make adjustments, but you keep trying, you keep showing up. Like, okay, yes, I am trying to lose weight, or yes, I am trying to cut back on this. Just because I have a bad day doesn't mean I just throw in the towel and be like, this will never work. Consistency means that you keep showing up, you keep adjusting, but you just keep working towards that goal. It doesn't matter if it doesn't come out perfect or the way you expect it. The only way that you're going to get to that place where you achieve success is that you keep going towards that goal. And so it's really important when it comes to boundaries, because it's so hard to establish boundaries. It's really important that you give yourself a little bit of compassion and grace. You know, for those people who tend to allow other people to push past their boundaries when they say no, which is a complete sentence again, and they end up turning their no into a yes because somebody is persistent about, them doing whatever. In essence, you have to evaluate what is happening there. Why can't I stay in my ground? And sometimes it means going back towards childhood, or going back to where you started to notice that that became an issue, right? Well, I want to make other people happy. Why do you want to make other people happy? When did you get this message that other people will not be happy, or they'll stop loving you if you don't do what they say? For a lot of people, having boundaries is also about feeling like you have a sense of control over your safety or over your space. And that may have been because during childhood or at some point in your life, you felt like you had no decision, that your voice did not matter when it came to you personally. And so you also sometimes need to go back, if you're struggling with being consistent, and really evaluate, why is this a struggle for me? Where did I get this message inside my head that says, you have to be accommodating, and that you have to be flexible, and it doesn't matter how you feel, you have to show up for other people. Because if you evaluate and take time to like process through that, why it impacted you, and who were the people that, model that for you, you can get some clarity as to where it came from. And it's also a good way to be able to say, you know what, with adult eyes, or, in hindsight, I can see that that really wasn't the intent, that this person just was unaware, or that I may have misjudged what this person was communicating or what their actions were saying. So that's the gist of it. That's the gist of my setting boundaries tip. You want to identify those boundaries, what type of boundaries you need to set in place. You want to jot them down so that you can create concrete goals, and not just goals, systems to kind of uh, help you stay consistent. Because that's the third tip, is you got to be consistent. No matter how many times you fall off, you got to keep showing back up for yourself. Because honestly, at the end of the day, if you don't prioritize your own physical and mental well-being, if you don't prioritize your own health, then how can you expect other people to? Because nobody's going to love you like you love you. Okay, you got to be able to understand how things are impacting you, because you're the only one feeling them. You're the only one experiencing it. No one can tell you what you're experiencing. And so if you don't prioritize yourself and love yourself enough, you can't hold people to an expectation or a standard of love, because you don't understand what that looks like for yourself. So that is my Just for Talk About It Tuesdays. Setting boundaries is self-love. Setting boundaries is self-care. It helps minimize stress. It creates healthy relationships, because people understand what you will and will not accept. And in turn, it also allows them to know how to navigate things with you, how to navigate topics with you. When you set healthy boundaries, it a lot of times positively impacts your finances, positively impacts your weight, your health. So I encourage you guys in this season, especially with all the things that are going on, all the stress around you, to show up for yourself. Set those boundaries, love on yourself, and until next time, live your best life, living through your stress life. Holla.